You can get me, you can get me all over the place now. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. It is the 1 day removed from impeachment. And can we just acknowledge that both sides somewhat beclowned themselves yesterday with some of their statements? Some of them were quite good. Some of them rather silly. I want to get into those. But there's more than that, though. The president had a rally last night in Michigan. We had a split-screen moment, split-screen America. On one side, you had the impeachment vote happening. On the other side, you had the president's rally in Michigan. Firing up the crowd there, going on about dishwashers and water. Actually, I'm glad he did that, and I want to explain why, even though it didn't really resonate with the crowd. But I do want to play this hour a good bit of the audio from impeachment and give you some thoughts on impeachment. I want to be, if I can, and this actually aggravated some people, I want to have a grown-up moment with you, if we can, outside of partisanship. Seriously, I know, but just let me do this for a moment, please. There are several billion people on planet Earth who do not get to choose their leader. They wake up every day in an authoritarian, oppressive, repressive regime. Their family could be carted away at any moment if they say something wrong. Their news is heavily censored. They only know what the government allows them to know. They can be killed for taking to the streets and protesting or getting online and saying something critical of their government. And we get to choose our leaders in this country. Now, there are people who want it to be majority vote. I actually disagree with them because I think we are a nation of 350 million diverse people with diverse geography and background and regions and idiosyncrasies in this country. And the Electoral College serves a purpose of finding candidates who can translate across those divisions, regions, idiosyncrasies outside of highly urban areas. But you can still vote, by and large. Your governor, your senator, your congressman, they're popular vote winners. The presidency is, frankly, the only exception. And then our Congress has the power, if they decide that the president is out of control, they can impeach him. And if they want, one house gets to impeach, the people's house gets to impeach, and the state's house gets to remove him, if they want. And there's a level of regionalism baked into that as well for broad levels of support. Now, you can dislike that the Democrats impeached the president. You can hate that they did it. You can be mad at them. I've heard all sorts of profanity uttered about the Democrats yesterday from Republican friends. But you should love that they have the power to do it. And you Democrats should love that the Republicans had the power to impeach Bill Clinton, because we're actually an anomaly in the world. We actually are an anomaly in the world. Most of the world does not get to do that. It is unique. And for all of this talk about how unstable our system is, how we're on the verge of constitutional crisis and constitutional meltdown, no, actually, we're doing just fine. These are not bugs in the system. This is not programmer error by the founders. This is the way it's supposed to work. And sometimes it's messy. And there are a lot of people. I heard someone yesterday on television. It was on CNN. I forget who said it. But someone on CNN yesterday said that this is the most unstable, debilitating, upside down time in American politics. That person has no sense of American history. And there are people on both sides who believe it and say it right now, that this is unprecedented in American history. This is something we've never seen before. In the period from 1850 to 1860, we had Dred Scott and Bloody Kansas. We had the country coming apart at the seams, literally, violently, people turning on each other. We didn't have that yesterday. Conservatives were at work. Progressives were out protesting. Congress was beclowning itself as usual. Ironically, as the House was voting for impeachment, the Senate was confirming more of President Trump's judges. and having more conversations with Inspector General Horowitz on just how screwed up the FBI was. But the FBI has been screwed up for a long time. This isn't something new. None of these things are new. The country is still working. The country functions properly. You still have a job. The economy's doing well. We don't know how long it's going to last. All economies go up and go down. No one knows when the economy is going to turn, but right now it's good. You've got a job. You're working. Your kids may be out of school. Mine yesterday, their last day of school for Christmas break. Your kids may still have a few more days. But your local community is fine. You are fine. You probably have presents under the tree already. We've got a pile of Amazon boxes I haven't opened to wrap yet. Life goes on. The sun came up this morning. There are several billion people on planet Earth who are way worse off than we are. Economically, societally, spiritually, religiously, but also governmentally. Yesterday, a Democratic member of Congress said if we don't impeach the President of the United States that we would have a dictatorship. No, Donald Trump is term limited. I remember Republicans after the year 2000 when George W. Bush was elected saying, oh, Al Gore's never going to leave. Bill Clinton's going to stay. It's so chaotic, Clinton's never going to leave the White House. I actually have good friends of mine who were part of the protesters who stood outside the vice presidential mansion chanting, get out of Dick Cheney's house, when Al Gore was winding down his vice presidency. When George W. Bush left office, there were Democrats who fretted openly on television that George Bush would not actually leave the White House, that he would be a dictator, that Dick Cheney would convince him to stay, that puppet master Cheney, his hand so far up the backside of George W. Bush, moving his lips, that George W. Bush would come out and say, I'm not leaving. And it would sound like his voice, but it would be Dick Cheney moving his mouth. There were Republicans who believed this of Barack Obama, that we would get to the end of 2016, Barack Obama would say, I'm not giving up this White House for Donald Trump. And now you have Democrats again going full circle. Joy Reid the other day on MSNBC uttered this. I've seen others say this, that Donald Trump's not going to leave. He's going to lose in 2020 and he's not going to leave. No, he's going to leave. And if he gets reelected, in 2024, he'll be term limited and he'll be gone. He may needle you. He may talk about his third term, his fourth term, his fifth term. But he's going to leave. They always do. Our system works, and to the extent that you don't think our system works, it's because you don't have a sense of history. There were times in the early days of our republic where it really looked like it might stop working. And there are times right now where people think that it may very well stop working again. But it's a season of our lives. And our country works compared to a whole lot of other countries. Our country works a lot better. This morning, as you woke up, the Queen of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland was sitting on her golden throne before the House of Lords, delivering an address to her parliament, having summoned the members of the House of Commons to give her government speech, a speech written by her government that she delivers. That system just went through a very chaotic electoral process where all of the elites said the election would go one way, and it wound up going a way they didn't like, and they're on meltdown right now. There is a divide in this country between the elite and regular souls out there. The wealthier you are, the more urban you are, the more contempt you have, not just for the president, but as voters. The wealthier you are, the better educated you are, the more contempt you have for people of faith in this country, who still are in the majority. And a lot of this is relational. It is actually more likely, statistically speaking, you don't have to believe me, believe Pew, believe Gallup, believe the YouGov poll. If you're a progressive, you are more likely to not encounter a conservative than if you are a conservative encountering a progressive. If you're a progressive, you'll encounter a conservative and probably not even know who they are. Increasingly in urban areas and in areas of academic concentration, academic universities, conservatives don't feel comfortable speaking as conservatives given the disdain of progressives towards them, because progressives don't think they ever encounter conservatives anymore. Conservatives actually routinely encounter progressives. So you don't have to believe me. Again, believe Pew, believe Gallup. Conservatives tend to be more tolerant of progressive opinion than progressives are of conservative opinion. And it has everything to do with where you live and who you interact with. We are relational people, and increasingly, particularly on the left, your relationships are only with people of the same side. And so you look at what's happening in this country, you look at the chaos in Washington, you look at the behavior of the president, which is appalling, by the way. The president last night on stage attacking a dead man, suggesting he might be burning in hell. I find it appalling. And so when you see progressives and they hear the crowd cheer with that, you can understand why they're upset about it. But you also got to realize that they don't know a lot of you or me. And so they look on this and they look on Donald Trump, and they don't know anyone who voted for Donald Trump, and they must have been a coup. The Russians must have stolen it. I don't know anybody who voted for him. It's like Pauline Kael, who went to bed assured that Richard Nixon was going to lose because no one she knew in the newsroom at the New York Times voted for him. But these are phases we go through. There were times in this country where it was much more chaotic, much more crazy. The rhetoric was worth. Let me play you this. I always keep this on standby. These are two ads I want to play you. They were done by Reason Magazine. And they take the actual words of John Adams and the actual words of Thomas Jefferson and their supporters and turn them into campaign ads. These are the words you will hear at the beginning, the words said by the newspapers who supported Adams. And then you'll hear very distinctly a single voice come on, and it'll be what John Adams himself said about Thomas Jefferson. Listen to this.
If Thomas Jefferson wins, murder, robbery, rape, adultery, and incest will be openly taught and practiced. The air will be rent with the cries of the distressed. The soil will be soaked with blood, and the nation black with crimes. Are you prepared to see your dwellings in flames, female chastity violated, children writhing on a pike?
I'm John Adams, and I approve this message because Jefferson is the son of a half-breed Indian squaw raised on hoe cakes, and Hamilton is a Creole bastard brat of a Scotch peddler.
That was actually stuff John Adams said about Thomas Jefferson on the campaign trail in 1800. The prior remarks, those were what the newspapers who supported Adams said. Now, Jefferson was no saint here. Here's the Jefferson camp and what Jefferson said about Adams.
John Adams is a blind, bald, crippled, toothless man who wants to start a war with France. While he's not busy importing mistresses from Europe, he's trying to marry one of his sons to a daughter of King George. Haven't we had enough monarchy in America?
I'm Thomas Jefferson, and I approve this message because John Adams is a hideous, hermaphroditical character with neither the force and firmness of a man nor the gentleness and sensibility of a woman.
Now, those are what the candidates actually said about each other in 1800. What the newspapers of the day said about each other. And this led to the 1850s and the crack up of this country before the Civil War. We're nowhere near that. We're going to get into the audio when we come back of all the things said on the floor of the House. Some of those really stupid things, including one of the really stupid things was said by a member of Congress from Georgia. We're going to get into all those. But I want to set the stage for here today. Nothing has changed. The president is not going to be removed from office. As much as the Democrats want, they've gone through a political act yesterday. But the overarching thing here is no matter which side of this you are on, you should thank God himself that you live in a country where it's all possible. Because there are several billion people on the planet who are going to wake up when the sun comes up, and they're going to go to a job oftentimes assigned to them by their own government, and if they complain about it, they may not make it home alive. And they don't have anyone they can vote for. If it is someone they can vote for, it's someone handpicked by the government. They have no choice. They can't complain about it, and if they try to, they may get killed. Yesterday, there were protesters in the streets of the United States of America demanding impeachment by the president by the House. They all went home and slept comfortably in their beds. None of them were harassed or killed, unlike in other countries. Last night, the opposition party controlling the House of Representatives impeached the President of the United States, the third time it's happened in American history. And they all went home and slept comfortably in their own beds, unafraid that government agents would come kicking down their doors, dragging them off to unknown places. Because that's our system. And as messy as it is, as ugly as it is, as chaotic as it can sometimes be, It's still the best there is, and I genuinely believe that, and you should too, and be thankful for it.
I really do like his opinion on things.
Erick Erickson, the information you need and the truth you demand.
He tells it like it is.
Live.
All right, we need to actually get into the audio from yesterday, and we will get into the play-by-play with the Democrats, what they're doing. I am going to hijack my own show for real personal note here, though. My wife's birthday was yesterday, and she has now lived longer than all of the women on her mother's side of the family, save her grandmother. She has outlived her mother and her aunt and all the other women. They all died of cancer before my wife's age. And now my wife has reached the age at which none of them were alive. And she has cancer and continues her battle still. She's in great health. She's actually at the gym right now. But she's my hero. She has she has taken this fight on. And now she has a Harley. I get gray hair worrying about it. Rides the countryside on her Harley. Has more guns than me. She's just awesome. And happy birthday to my wife. And I'm proud to be able to go through this fight with her. A buddy of mine, all of you would know. I guess it's a humble brag. He's super famous. All of you would know him. I'm not going to tell you who he is. That would cause all sorts of problems for him to know. People to know we're friends. Sent me a very nice note this morning. He has lived longer than his father, than his brother. He passed their ages. He is now alone in the world, so to speak. And says it is definitely a complex emotional thing to get to a point like that where you realize you've outlived the rest of them, and you've reached an age that none of the rest of them reached. And that's where my wife is now. I'm actually throwing her a surprise birthday party tomorrow night in Macon with some of her Bible study friends. But in any event, happy birthday to my wife. I very much love you, and I'm proud of you. Now, impeachment. Let me get you some of the audio. We'll get into some of the more embarrassing stuff. But I want to start off with this from Congressman Doug Collins from here in Georgia. And if I always do a terrible job of rearranging my audio here. Now, let's see. Here's Doug Collins.
There's a reason behind this impeachment. And even Speaker Pelosi said it would be dangerous to leave it to voters to determine whether President Trump stays in office. Really? After we just said the Pledge of Allegiance, we go back to the Speaker's own words and said it would be dangerous to leave it to the voters? I will tell you right now, Madam Speaker, we on the Republican side have no problem taking our case to the majority and to the people of this country because they elected Donald Trump, and it is a matter for the voters, not this House, not in this way, not in the way this is being done. It has trampled everything this House believes in.
That was Doug Collins from here in Georgia, and Mike Johnson now from Louisiana.
After all their Herculean efforts, they could only come up with 2 short articles of impeachment. On the first, the Democrats know there is zero direct evidence in this record of these proceedings to show that President Trump engaged in any abuse of power. As you'll hear today, their entire case is based on hearsay, speculation, and conjecture, and there's not a single fact witness that can provide testimony to support their baseless allegations. The Democrats' second claim is that President Trump obstructed Congress by simply doing what virtually every other president in the modern era has also done, and that is to assert, Mr. Chairman, a legitimate executive privilege which protects the separation of powers. And you know what? If they disagreed with that, the Democrats could and should have just simply gone a few blocks away to a federal court to get an expedited court order compelling the extra documents and information they requested. That's what's always been done in the past. But they didn't do that here because these Democrats don't have time for it. They are trying to meet their own arbitrary, completely reckless, and Machiavellian timeline to take down a president that they loathe. The real abuse of power here is on the part of the House Democrats. They has feverishly produced and pursued this impeachment 20 times faster than the impeachment investigation of Bill Clinton. They've tried to reach their predetermined political outcome, and along the way they've steamrolled over constitutionally guaranteed due process,
Gentleman's time has
previously
expired.
sacrosanct House rules and the federal rules of civil procedure.
That is Congressman Mike Johnson from Louisiana. Oh, the Democrats had their say, too. Did you know impeaching Donald Trump is like ending slavery and Jim Crow? I wish I was making it up. Yeah, that's right, folks. The hysterical rhetoric on both sides when we come back. Good morning. It is Erick Erickson here. Yes, we're talking impeachment. If you're just tuning in, the phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. By the way, if you're a program director for one of our affiliates listening, I forgot to send an email, and my producer has gone on vacation. I will send you an email, but Chris Burns is going to be in for me on Monday, Thursday, and Friday next week. I will actually be here Christmas Eve and Christmas. We've got a special Christmas presentation for Christmas, and then Chris will be in Monday and Tuesday of the week after. We'll have a best of on New Year's Day, so none of us have to work, and then I'll be back on the 2nd. And thanks to Chris Burns and Dynamic Money, regular sponsors of this here program. Now, if you need a good financial advisor, by the way, anywhere in the state of Georgia, go to dynamicmoney.com, talk to Chris. We got to get more audio of the Republicans and the Democrats yesterday debating impeachment. There were some outrageous things that were said. Well, one of these, and I know some of you believe this and you're going to get mad at me, but I want to play this from Peter King, retiring congressman from New York.
Georgia.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. At this time, I yield a minute and a half to the gentleman from New York, Mr. King.
Gentleman is recognized for a minute and a half.
Thank you, gentlemen, for yielding. Madam Speaker, I rise today in strong opposition to the articles of impeachment against President Trump. As Chairman Nadler must recall, exactly 21 years ago today, I spoke on this floor in opposition to the impeachment of President Clinton. And 21 years ago tomorrow, I voted against all 4 articles of impeachment against President Clinton. Today's articles of impeachment against President Trump are an assault on our Constitution and the American people. To impeach a president for a phone call for which no crime is charged, never mind a high crime, and asserting his constitutional prerogatives as president is a clear abuse of power by the Congress. It sets the dangerous precedent of weaponizing impeachment to undo the solemn decision of the American people. Madam Speaker, President Trump and I grew up in the same borough of New York City. And today I am proud to stand with President Trump and urge a no vote on these horrible acts of impeachment, these articles of impeachment. I yield back the balance of my time. And
listen, this is not an assault on the Constitution, and I know that there are a lot of people who believe that. It's not an assault on the Constitution. It is a constitutional process about which you and I may disagree, but it is not a constitutional assault. The Democrats were not the only ones making some silly rhetoric here. But wait, here is Hakeem Jeffries of New York.
To solicit foreign interference in an American election. That is unacceptable. That is unconscionable. That is unconstitutional. There are some who cynically argue that the impeachment of this president will further divide an already fractured union. But there is a difference between division and clarification. Slavery once divided the nation, but emancipators rose up to clarify that all men are created equally. Suffrage once divided the nation, but women rose up to clarify that all voices must be heard in our democracy. Jim Crow once divided the nation, but civil rights champions rose up to clarify that all are entitled to equal protection under the law.
Really? So impeaching the president is akin to Jim Crow, ending slavery, giving women why do these people think it's a good idea to say dumb stuff like this? Oh, but it's not just him. Here is Representative Cicilline from Rhode Island and his choice of rhetoric.
He tried to cheat to win re-election. And this wasn't an attack on Vice President Biden. This was an attack on our democracy. And if we do not hold the president accountable today, we will no longer live in a democracy. We will live in a dictatorship where any future president will be free to abuse their office in order to get reelected.
Dictators don't get reelected, moron. Listen, I have little tolerance for idiotic statements like this, that somehow we're in a dictatorship. The man's up for reelection next year. If you don't like it, vote him out then. But it wasn't just him. Here's Representative Jayapal from Washington State.
Without that, we are no longer a democracy. We are a monarchy or a dictatorship.
Oh, good grief.
And so today, to uphold my oath to Constitution and country, I will vote to impeach Donald J. Trump.
And she looks excited to be doing it, too. This reminds me, where's the audio I have here? Yeah. You know, all that you've got the reports. Nancy Pelosi did not want to do this. This was a solemn moment for Nancy Pelosi. She did not want to be a part of impeachment. Whatever. Listen to this supercut of the Democrats.
We gathered today under the dome of this temple of democracy to exercise one of the most solemn powers that this body can take.
It's with solemn purpose today that I vote to impeach.
Madam Speaker, it is with a solemn sense of duty that I write.
Madam Speaker, as we take this solemn, necessary step of impeaching President Trump.
I rise on this solemn occasion.
Impeaching a president is one of the most solemn and consequential.
I cast this solemn vote for the many individuals in my district.
Members of Congress swear a solemn oath to protect and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and today we fulfill our oath.
Madam Speaker, I rise with a heavy heart to support this resolution.
I rise today with a heavy heart.
It is with a heavy heart, but a resolved one. Madam Speaker, it is with a heavy heart and a profound sense of the gravity of this moment that I rise today in support of the impeachment.
Madam Speaker, I rise with a heavy heart. The two most difficult votes any member of Congress ever has to cast to vote to go to war are to impeach.
Today, as Speaker of the House, I solemnly and sadly open the debate.
This is a very sad day, and I do not take impeachment lightly.
I am saddened, but I'm not shocked.
It's with profound sadness that I stand here today.
It is a sad day in America.
Today, sadly, we are voting to impeach President Donald John Trump.
Yes, I am saddened, but I'm not shocked.
Y tristemente estamos presentes considerando las acciones de nuestro presidente de los Estados Unidos.
That was actual representative in the United States of America who spoke Spanish to explain his vote. It's sad day, grave day, sad day, monumental day, overwhelming day. These were the people who were campaigning with the slogan, impeach the MFer. I have a hard time believing they're really sad about it. In fact, Nancy Pelosi, as some of them started clapping last night after the first vote was announced, had to glare at them to stop them from clapping. They had to be admonished ahead of time not to celebrate. What is more annoying to me is not the Democrats doing this. It's that the media is treating it as if they're serious. Oh, they really didn't want to be here. The amount of stories I've heard of the Democrats, I didn't really want to be here. Whatever. They did. They campaigned on it. Here's Steny Hoyer today. I want to play two great clips of Steny Hoyer. Here he is. Listen to this one first.
Neither a Democrat nor a Republican. Representative Amash, of course, is the only member of this House who has no allegiance to either party, but to his country. He is supporting, as I've said, both articles. We need not ask who will be the first to show courage by standing up to President Trump. The question we must now ask is, who will be the last to find it? The pages of our history are filled with Americans who have the courage to choose country over party or personality. But as President Kennedy wrote, the stories of past courage can teach. They can offer hope. They can provide inspiration. But they cannot supply courage itself. For this, President Kennedy said, each man, each woman must look into their own soul. I urge my fellow colleagues in the House and, yes, in the Senate to look into your soul. Summons the courage to vote for our Constitution and our democracy. I understand we will all not see the same conclusion. But to do less betrays our oath and that of our founders, who pledged their lives, their fortune, and their sacred honor.
Okay, that was Steny Hoyer yesterday, the ranking Democrat. Well, Steny Hoyer's been around for a while. Here he is during the Clinton impeachment.
Today's historic and tragic vote is not about whether any of us condone the private behavior of the president. It is, however, about whether we are committed to uphold the Constitution, the touchstone of our freedom and the articulation of the genius of our democratic government's separation of powers. Nor is this vote about whether the President of the United States is above the law. He is not. Indeed, as has been amply demonstrated over the past 6 years, even the President, as must each of his fellow citizens, must respond to the demands of the law. Moreover, it is clear that upon leaving office, the President could be held accountable in a court of law if charges were to be brought against him alleging the wrongdoing which the Judiciary Committee Republicans have accused him of today. Nor, as some claim, is this vote about process or simply moving this weighty matter from our calendar to that of the United States Senate. A Pontius Pilate-like act, presumably designed to rationalize the profoundly precedent-setting action that this House now contemplates.
A Pontius Pilate-like act. Remember, Bill Clinton lost his bar license because he obstructed justice by lying under oath to deny a fellow American citizen justice. He lied under oath in a court of law to obstruct the justice of a fellow American citizen while he was president of the United States. But that was all politics then. Even Hoyer admits that the president could have a criminal case against him if he weren't president of the United States. But no, this was all politics to him then. You know, some of these people who've been around long enough. Here, let me play you one more. I'm going to play you this, and then I'll tell you who it is. This is, again, from the impeachment debate of Bill Clinton in the House.
That the president's actions do not fall in the meaning of high crimes or misdemeanors, but yet we persist. We have divided this House with partisan politics, sowing mistrust and exposing the darkness in our own hearts. It started with the first vote of the 105th Congress to censure the Speaker, and it has continued to this day to the vote to impeach the President. With all of the lost opportunities in between, it is no wonder we are losing the public's trust. After today, when the impeachment frenzy subsides, we will survey the damage to our own political system. We will have unnecessarily crippled the presidency for a generation to come. We will have wantonly weakened this House of Representatives, reaching a new low in partisan rancor. We will have substantially subverted the Constitution, which was designed to reflect the will of the people in a republic, not to promote a political party in what is slipping towards a parliamentary system. We will intentionally have ignored the business of the American people, both at home and abroad, and we will have changed the political climate where decency, polity, and civility have been sacrificed on the altar of political greed, cynicism, and shame. This vote is unworthy of our institution. We will pay for it in the years to come. We will undermine the ability of the next generation of American presidents to lead us through the enormous challenges that face the 21st century.
That was Representative Diana DeGette from Colorado. She presided over the House impeachment vote yesterday. She presided over the House impeachment vote yesterday because Nancy Pelosi, as Speaker of the House, wanted to speak and vote. And the Speaker of the House, under the House rules, can't participate in the debate. Nancy Pelosi actually on the floor yesterday said that the president is an ongoing threat to our national security and would be if they didn't remove him from office, and that's why he needed to be removed from office. I thought it was because of bribery. She keeps moving the goalposts on this. But wait, you heard the Steny Hoyer remark that this was like the vote against Bill Clinton was like Pontius Pilate. Well, there was another Pontius Pilate comparison yesterday. It was just as dumb, and this one came from a Georgia Republican, and we should actually play that audio when we come back.
News and in-depth analysis from Erick Erickson.
That's right. You should text recipe to 33777. I send out good recipes. I do. All you got to do, like you're typing in a number to text to, the number is 33777, and just send the word recipe, and I'll get you signed up. All right. I got to play this, and I want to play it in full context so that you hear the full thing. This is Congressman Barry Loudermilk from right here in Georgia. The first half, I totally agree with, and then it all goes downhill. Who on earth told him this would be a good idea?
I thank my colleague from Georgia and friend, Mr. Collins. Madam Speaker, I rise today in opposition not only to these articles of impeachment, but in strong opposition to the process that has brought us to this point. Our Constitution and Bill of Rights are all about process. Our founders knew that a government without constraints could accuse anyone of any crime at any time, even without compelling evidence. That's why the 5th and the 14th Amendments established a bedrock principle of innocent until proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt.
Yep.
But on November the 14th, Speaker Pelosi informed the press that the president should prove his innocence. When she stated, Mr. President, if you have anything that shows your innocence, then he should make that known. The Constitution also guarantees that the accused can call witnesses to testify on their behalf. But the Republicans and the president were continually denied that right throughout this process.
That's true.
The 6th Amendment guarantees the right of the defendant to face their accuser. But not only have the Democrats prohibited Republicans and the president from questioning the so-called whistleblower, his identity has been kept secret.
Yep.
Before you take this historic vote today, 1 week before Christmas, I want you to keep this in mind. When Jesus was falsely accused of treason, Pontius Pilate gave Jesus the opportunity to face his accusers. During that sham trial, Pontius Pilate afforded more rights to Jesus than the Democrats have afforded this president in this process. I yield back.
Okay. If we're really going to do this, if we're going to drag Jesus into this, Barry, I've got Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John pulled up right now. We only need to go to John, or to Luke, rather, who interviewed the eyewitnesses and gives us one of the best, most thorough play-by-plays of Jesus's birth, life, and death and resurrection. Pontius Pilate was going to find Jesus not guilty and still punish him. He got the right to confront his accusers. Unlike the whistleblower, the president was invited to participate. He declined to participate. Fact check, true. Oh, look, I like Barry Loudermilk, but leave Jesus out of impeachment. In American impeachment trial, Jesus does not care about your American impeachment trial. I assure you, Jesus does not care about this impeachment trial. Just stop. And, by the way, I mentioned this last evening on my other show, and there were people calling in trying to be right. Jesus was executed, an innocent person. They're not going to kill the president. And Pontius Pilate was willing to punish Jesus, even though he acknowledged he was innocent. He was going to flog him and release him. Holy cow, some of you people, you worship false gods and idols. And I'm not accusing Barry Loudermilk of that. Those of you who want to rationalize and defend it, though, yeah, keep your politics away from Jesus right now, please, when it comes to impeachment. That's annoying. Let me give you the most articulate response on impeachment. This from Congressman Chip Roy of Texas.
Mr. Speaker, our founders intentionally did not embrace recalls or votes of no confidence. Rather, we demand from Congress evidence of high crimes and misdemeanors. While my colleagues are free to dislike the president, and while they may reasonably view the infamous phone call and negotiations with the Ukrainians as something less than perfect, they are not free to impeach something less than a high crime and misdemeanor. In just over 10 months, though, the people are free to decide, and we should let them. The eyes of the world are upon us, Madam Speaker. The press galleries are full. Our floor is filled with members. When will we give the world something better than this? My colleagues wax eloquent about the constitutions they found under mothballs. Where is respect for the Constitution when the People's House daily refuses to do its actual job while shredding federalism and limited government? Today in Mexico, a young girl will be abused while being trafficked toward our open borders, while some here yell kids in cages and play race politics in the false name of compassion. Today in New York, a young mother will be coerced into abortion by taxpayer-funded Planned Parenthood, while we allow the genocide of the unborn in the false name of choice. Today across America, diabetics will struggle to afford insulin due to a healthcare system ravaged by government and insurance bureaucrats empowered in the false name of coverage. And today our children inherit $100 million of debt an hour, borrowed in the false name of what government can provide. In this conduct by Congress failing to do its jobs, that should be impeached. And one might ask if America would be better off taking the first 435 names out of the phone book to represent us in the United States House than what is on display here today. Today is not a dark day because the American people know this. America is great, Washington is broken, and we're taking our country back.
Amen. Amen. Chip Roy given to business to the Democrats. Far better than dragging Jesus into it. Now, what of the articles of impeachment? Well, Nancy Pelosi is holding a press conference suggesting they may not send the articles of impeachment to the United States Senate unless Mitch McConnell guarantees them the trial they want. So we've gone through this entire process where the Democrats have ranted about the Constitution, and now the House of Representatives wants to dictate the terms of the Senate's impeachment trial in order to give them the Senate. I thought this was about the Constitution. If it was really about the Constitution, the House would not be trying to exercise control over the Senate's rules and procedures. Maybe they were lying. I'm coming. I'm trying to find this. This just happened. Where is the Senator Mitch McConnell basically just blew up the impeachment antics of the Democrats in a floor statement saying essentially it looks like the House Democrats have gotten cold feet. The House Democrats, welcome, by the way. I should reset. I'm a bad host, aren't I? It's Erick Erickson here. The phone number, if you would like to be a part of the program, 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. But don't actually try to call because I gave the call screener a vacation for Christmas and forgot to get a new call screener for a while. They were gone. But I'm giving you the number anyway, because when I come, I promise, when we come back from Christmas, we'll have a call screener. Here we go. This is it. Mitch McConnell, this just happened. Just happened. While we were in commercial break, this happened. Senator Mitch McConnell.
They voted to impeach President Trump. Over the last 12 weeks, House Democrats have conducted the most rushed, least thorough, and most unfair impeachment inquiry in modern history. Now, their slapdash process.
Where'd you go, Mitch?
Inquiry in modern history. Now, their slapdash process has concluded in the first purely partisan presidential impeachment since the wake of the Civil War. The opposition to impeachment was bipartisan. Only one part of one faction wanted this outcome. The House's conduct risks deeply damaging the institutions of American government. This particular House of Representatives has let its partisan rage at this particular president create a toxic new precedent that will echo well into the future. That's what I want to discuss right now. The historic degree to which House Democrats have failed to do their duty and what it will mean for the Senate to do ours. So let's start at the beginning.
Just so you're listening,
start with the fact
this is Mitch McConnell. He just spoke on the floor of the Senate. This is relevant to the impeachment issue.
Before he was even inaugurated. Here's a reporter in April of 2016. Donald Trump isn't even the Republican nominee yet. But impeachment is already on the lips of pundits, newspaper editorials, constitutional scholars, and even a few members of Congress. April 2016. On Inauguration Day, 2017, the headline in the Washington Post, "The campaign to impeach President Trump has begun." That was day one. In April 2017, 3 months into the presidency, a senior House Democrat said, "I'm going to fight every day until he's impeached." That was 3 months into the administration. In December 2017, 2 years ago, Congressman Jerry Nadler was openly campaigning to be the ranking member on the House Judiciary Committee, specifically because he was an expert on impeachment. That's Nadler's campaign to be the top Democrat on judiciary. This week wasn't even the first time House Democrats have introduced articles of impeachment. It was actually the 7th time. They started less than 6 months after the president was sworn in. They tried to impeach President Trump for being impolite to the press, for being mean to professional athletes, for changing President Obama's policy on transgender people in the military. All of these things were high crimes and misdemeanors, according to Democrats. Now, this wasn't just a few people. Scores of Democrats voted to move forward with impeachment on 3 of those prior occasions. So let's be clear. The House's vote yesterday was not some neutral judgment that Democrats came to with great reluctance. It was the predetermined end of a partisan crusade that began before President Trump was even nominated, let alone sworn in. For the very first time in modern history, we've seen a political faction in Congress promise from the moment a president election ended, that they would find some way to overturn it.
That was Mitch McConnell on the floor of the Senate just a few moments ago, accusing the Democrats of cold feet. If you're just tuning in, it is Erick Erickson here, and the House Democrats are now considering not conveying the articles of impeachment to the United States Senate. Now, what's so interesting here is that the Democrats in the House have made this a big issue about defending the Constitution. The Constitution places the right of trials for impeachment into the United States Senate and says that the Senate gets to pick its own rules. For the House of Representatives to go on for months and months about this is on the Constitution, this is about the Constitution, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, doesn't seem like they actually care that much. Doesn't seem like they care all that much about the Constitution if they're now trying to demand that the Senate comply with rules they want. This isn't going to go anywhere. Meanwhile, we have some breaking news here. It is 13 after the hour, and we have breaking news that you're all going to want to hear about that's relevant to us here in Georgia. Georgia's unemployment rate, according to Governor Brian Kemp's office just a short time ago, is now at record low. It is at a record low of 3.3%, the lowest level since the government started keeping track 43 years ago. The record was reached after the state economy added 6,500 jobs last month, slightly less than average for November, but enough to cross the threshold. In October, the employment rate dipped to 3.4%, matching the previous low notched in 2001 towards the end of the tech boom. And now we're at a record low. Georgia has added 60,900 jobs this year. Now, if you'll allow, I want to come back to impeachment and also the Horowitz report. But let me spend a moment on this because I want to shift to a topic, and I had it in my show notes yesterday as well. And let me make sure I get the name of the other company right, because this is relevant to every single one of us here in Georgia. This news. Yesterday, there was a story. Where is it? I don't know that I can find it. It was in the Rome News Tribune yesterday that there is a plant, a recycling plant in Floyd County that is expanding. And they're going to do textile recycling. I cannot now remember the name of the facility. My apologies to those of you up in Rome listening. But they're going to this facility up there is expanding and adding. Now today, WRGA, where it's always so. I'm sorry, it's always creepy for me to hop over to a site of a news station news talk station I'm on and see my face and says I'm on right now. It is kind of creepy. But WRGA up in Rome, WRGAnews.com. They've got this story in Adairsville, Barnsley Gardens. If you've never been to Barnsley Gardens, go to Barnsley Gardens. It's wonderful. I love Barnsley Gardens. If I could broadcast from Barnsley, I would take vacations up there and probably just stay. But in any event, 238 new jobs are coming to Adairsville. Governor Kemp announced yesterday that Greenview Floors International, a leading manufacturer of vinyl and laminate flooring, will establish its first U.S. manufacturing facility in Bartow County. The China-based company is going to create 238 jobs and invest $26 million in Adairsville. That is great for the Bartow County economy. The expansion of the other place in Rome is fantastic for the Rome economy. It is. All of this is fantastic, and it's good news to have jobs created, to have businesses expanding, to have businesses want to invest here. But there's a problem all of us need to talk about. Did you know, and I did not know this until yesterday, did you know that 75 to 80% of all economic growth in Georgia is happening north of I-20? North of I-20. Geographically, the majority of the state of Georgia exists south of I-20. Population-wise, north of I-20. And the jobs are going to where the population is, not to where the land is. And that's, to some degree, a problem. You've got towns down in middle and south Georgia that are collapsing. And honestly, part of the problem is infrastructure. You know, I was on the Macon City Council for almost an entire term. I got a job in radio. I wasn't going to run again. It was the worst job I ever had. I had to leave a few months shy of my first full term because I got a job in radio, and they wouldn't allow me to even though it was part-time, I couldn't be on city council and also have a radio job. So off I went to my radio job. But we've got an airport down in middle Georgia, and you add 500 more feet there, and you could offload some capacity from Atlanta. But you know, if you've ever lived in the Macon-Bibb County area, the whole place, it just the divisions in the area. We got Houston County south of us, and they clean our clock all the time on this stuff because they all get on the same page. And in Macon-Bibb County, you got to fight over 50-year-old grievances. And nobody ever does anything. But part of the problem economically is that with the exception of Savannah, south of I-20, you don't have major economic and transport hubs. There's no major aviation routed outside of Atlanta other than Savannah. With Gulfstream and the Savannah airport, you've got regular service for multiple airlines into Savannah. But I mean, take Macon, for example. It's interesting and notable that Columbus, Albany, Valdosta, Brunswick, and Augusta are getting extra flights from Delta to Atlanta, but not Macon. Now, part of that is it's an hour drive to the Atlanta airport, and so you can just drive up. They do have a flight now from Macon up to Washington, D.C. to the Baltimore airport, which is good, apparently packed all the time. But you don't have major regional or national air service other than Atlanta and Savannah. And so those are your economic hubs, and the majority of growth is happening north of I-20. The other major economic hub is in Savannah, and the rest of the state is hanging on. And frankly, if Middle Georgia could get its act together and work regionally together instead of all this grievance mongering you have in different parts of Middle Georgia, including the Macon area, perhaps you could attract jobs south of I-20. But for those of you who are listening up in North Georgia, Dalton, Jasper, Clarksville, Athens, Rome, your economies are doing better than everyone south of you, and that's great for you. It really is. The problem is that eventually you get into a subsidy situation where those of you in North Georgia economically have to prop up South Georgia. And that in and of itself can breed resentment. In the state is, and I know the governor and the lieutenant governor both are deeply interested in this issue of they're going to need to economically try to find ways to revitalize and incentivize businesses outside of the North Georgia area. Because frankly, you're also in an infrastructure situation where at some point in North Georgia, you're going to have to start taking people's homes and businesses to add more lanes to the highway when you got plenty of land south. The problem is you don't have people south, and you're going to have to build new infrastructure in the south to get people to stay and revitalize schools and communities in South Georgia that are collapsing. and finding ways to divert air travel from Atlanta and give people an opportunity to fly in elsewhere. If you live in Dublin or Tifton or Cordele or Warner Robins or wherever, driving all the way up to Atlanta to get to the airport when you could possibly have air travel and incentivize air cargo then and freight operations outside of Atlanta, south of Atlanta, it's something the state's going to have to figure out because so many people are now moving up to North Georgia because you're close to the Greenville Airport, the Chattanooga Airport, the Atlanta Airport. You've got rail infrastructure up there, and you got a lot of people up there. And this disparity is only going to grow. Again, there's breaking news here this morning. Georgia now has record unemployment. Record low unemployment, I should say. 3.1%. We have never had unemployment that low in the state of Georgia. But 75 to 80% of that is coming from above I-20. And that creates long-term problems and economic gaps in the state that will cause the state political chaos and cultural chaos long-term unless we figure out ways to do it. And frankly, a lot of it, I hate to put it this way, I don't mean to offend anybody, but it has to do with those areas south of I-20 getting their own act together, too.
As both sides target Georgia for 2020.
So it is Erick Erickson here, and thank you for tuning in across the state of Georgia. I gotta say this, Lindsey Graham just has a tweet out, and I'm chuckling about it. Not allowing the Senate to act on approved articles of impeachment becomes constitutional extortion and creates chaos for the presidency. It also sets in motion a tremendous threat to our constitutional system of checks and balances. It really is just silly. And we've spent since October. I mean, the Democrats spent a month behind closed doors coordinating with the whistleblower to roll out an impeachment case, and they short-circuited the process. They didn't call the witnesses they should have called. They hid behind a claim that it would take forever for courts to litigate, which isn't true. And anyone who knows the process knows the courts would have given expedited relief to the House Democrats. But they did it anyway, and now they're like, oh, no, we may not take this to the Senate. We may not actually go to the Senate. John Berman has this exchange on CNN with Representative Jim Clyburn, the majority whip.
It's almost like, let's give him a fair trial and hang him. I mean, it's the verse of that.
As long as it takes, are you willing to hold the articles indefinitely? If Mitch McConnell doesn't concede the points that you're asking him to, are you suggesting it's possible you will never transmit the articles of impeachment?
If it were me, yes, that's what I'm saying. I have no idea what the Speaker will do. But if you have a preordained outcome that's negative to your actions, why walk into it?
Y'all, lest you forget, it was a preordained outcome in the United States Senate that Bill Clinton would not be convicted. Everyone knew going into the Clinton impeachment trial that he was not going to be convicted in the Senate, and yet the House Republicans still transmitted the articles of impeachment to the Senate. So the House Democrats are less responsible with the impeachment of Donald Trump than the House Republicans were with Bill Clinton. This is silly nonsense that they're engaged in. Why are they getting cold feet on this? They've gone through the spectacle, and what it really is, what it amounts to, is they wanted their donors to feel good about it. They wanted their base to feel good about it. They needed to scratch that itch. Now they've scratched the itch, and they don't have to move forward with it. But that just gives Republicans another talking point. But can I be real honest with you? There are a lot of high-minded people saying high-minded things about impeachment today. And the reality is this. Nobody's going to care about impeachment in November. Some people will forget it even happened. We may be moved on from impeachment next week, depending on what happens. Events change things. Events always change things. And by the time we get to November, people are going to care about the economy, the president's latest mean tweets, and who the Democratic rival to the president is, and what was said in the presidential debate and all that. Nobody's going to be talking about economy except the partisan fringes. No one's going to care. Impeachment is not going to change anything. The president is not going to be convicted in the Senate, and we're going to have this before the voters. And guess what? I don't know that the president gets reelected next year. I have no idea. Events change things. There's a lot that's going to happen between now and then in the economy, the military, national security, culturally, all sorts of stuff. We have no idea what's going to happen and who the Democratic nominee is going to be. It's going to be Joe Biden, but we have no idea. 15. Nobody's going to be talking about impeachment next November. This really isn't that consequential. But the president had a rally last night we should talk about. Okay, I gotta interrupt all the political news. I gotta interrupt the political news because wow. So as you are aware, I am sure, Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker comes out today. I'm going to see it on Saturday. But what also comes out, the other movie that comes out that's getting all sorts of attention is Cats. You know, the Broadway musical Cats. It's got Judi Dench and James Corden and Idris Elba and Ian McKellen and Jennifer Hudson and Taylor Swift and on it goes. The London Telegraph has seen it. Let me read you the... I'm sorry. I gotta read you this. This is the Tim Roby is the film critic for the London Telegraph. Prejudging Cats based on the widely ridiculed trailers wouldn't be fair, especially once you realize they did it a lot of favors. They hid the big numbers. They silenced the singing. Minimized where James Corden's wobbly pratfalls into piles of dead fish, Idris Elba's leering expressions, and the entire role of Ian McKellen as Gus the Theater Cat. Once seen, the only realistic way to fix Cats would be to spay it, neuter it, or simply pretend it never happened. Because it's an all-time disaster, a rare and star-spangled calamity which will leave jaws littered across floors and agents unemployed. For the first time since the head-spinningly dire dadcom Old Dogs of 2010, I'm giving a film 0 stars. At every turn, you imagine the panicked justifications. Andrew Lloyd Webber's stage musical ran for 21 years in the West End and has grossed $3.5 billion worldwide. Memory, sung by the depressed ex-glamour cat Grisabella, is a household favorite even your gran has covered. All of Tom Hopper's last 3 films have won Oscars, somehow, and doesn't the eclectic cast have something for everyone? It becomes a scramble to get out alive. What worked at Drury Lane in 1981, a suspension of disbelief with the whole cast pirouetting in catsuits, has been converted into a computer-aided hellscape so off-putting you may suspect eye failure. Uber's Cats has an impossible job recovering from its own surreally charmless visual. I can't say style. Choices certainly abound. None of them are good. Meanwhile, the Frankensteinian marriage of live performance, digital fur technology, and human cat anatomical splicing, the boobs, they have boobs? Has such endlessly sinister impact that the film's certificate ought to be for 18 and older only. As it starts, a writhing pillowcase is flung into an alley off Piccadilly Circus containing Victoria, an unwanted ingenue cat played by pretty, helpless ballerina Francesca Hayward. From all around her, a chorus of disembodied faces atrociously wedded to the efforts of the effects team bear down. A ghoulish synthesized arrangement of the overture gathers force. Already we know we're in deep, deep trouble. Jokes don't save us, since Lee Hall's script tries every cat idiom in the Oxford English Dictionary to find a funny one. Plot 2 can't come to the rescue because T.S. Eliot's source poems didn't provide a plot. As each cameo performance comes and goes, the mind boggles at which of them, according to judging matriarch Old Deuteronomy, a deeply earnest, inescapably hilarious Judi Dench, could possibly be deemed top cat. First contender, Jenny Ann Dotz, is a lazy house tabby in the desperate crotch-sniffing shape of Rebel Wilson. Her big number has mice in a dollhouse with human faces and cockroaches in march formation, one of which she gobbles down in mad close-up. With its nightmare production values and nauseating lurches in scale and perspective, it might be the ugliest big screen musical sequence ever mounted. But let's not count our chickens just yet. In comes Jason Derulo as a sleazy playa named Rum Tum Tugger and Corden's Greedy Guts Buster Jones, neither carrying a tune to speak of, and both made to strip off outerwear and get furrily naked without genitals. McKellen, meanwhile, is caught lapping backstage from a dish, tongue loose. It's one of 1,000 gifable moments an audience won't be able to delete. Grisabella traipses in from the shadows, shawled in what looks like the remains of 4 other dead cat pelts. Hooper gets her to do memory at the base of a lamppost, essentially duplicating her one-shot I Dreamed a Dream for Anne Hathaway and Les Mis. No Oscar here when Hudson hobbles amateurishly into the ball for double the Pathos reprise. My adjacent colleague was reduced cackling. For an hour and a quarter, I wondered if Taylor Swift, who's nowhere to be seen, had forced her management at knife point to yank her out of the edit. But nope, she drops by on a suspended moon and is gone in the space of a song, McCavity, which comes closer than anything before it to actually working. Swift is cat-light and can sing, which, guess what, turns out to be attributes helpful in a musical. If we pretended this bit was her weirdest ever pop video and ignored Elba's McCavity sashaying in with shiny chocolate fur for the worst shots of his life, we might just about live with it. Finding any high points in Cat, though, takes serious scratching. This is the British movie reviewer for The Telegraph. 0 stars for the movie Cats, urging viewers to save their sanity and avoid going to see it. Wow. I'm sorry. I could talk about impeachment all day, but I saw that, started reading, it's like, wow, this is one of the worst movie reviews I think I've ever read. I'm going to see Star Wars. I will not go see Cats. Now, last night, I did happen to see the President of the United States on stage in Michigan, giving the business to the Democrats, and, well, he doesn't really care about having been impeached. And, in fact, he did a Bill Clinton scenario.
So what happens is Bill Clinton said to Crooked Hillary, his very dishonest wife, said, Crooked Hillary, do you think he calls her Crooked Hillary? Maybe he just calls her Crooked. He said, Crooked, I'm telling you, Crooked, I don't like what I'm seeing in Michigan. I don't like what I'm seeing in Wisconsin. He said, I took a trip to Wisconsin, and I'll tell you what, they had those Trump Pence signs all the way to the convention area, every lawn. I don't like Wisconsin. And they said, oh, don't worry about it. What the hell does he know?
By the way, he also said this.
When I first started this beautiful trip, this beautiful journey, I just said to the First Lady, you're so lucky I took you on this fantastic journey. It's so much fun. They want to impeach you. They want to do worse than that. By the way, it doesn't really feel like we're being impeached, do you? The country is doing better than ever before. We did nothing wrong. And we have tremendous support in the Republican Party like we've never had before. Nobody's ever had this kind of support.
Yep. Listen, let me just play you some of his audio out there. We left in the crowd and everything, so you get a sense of this. The president last night in Michigan. You know, it really was an interesting dynamic in that the House was voting on impeachment while the president was on stage at this rally. So you got split screen America then. You got the Democratic fan fiction on one side, Republican fan fiction on the other side, both sides going for the bases. Here's the president on Pelosi.
But I know one thing, Americans will show up by the tens of millions next year to vote Pelosi the hell out of office. But it's so disappointing. I see a woman, Carolyn Maloney. She's a long time, nothing much, believe me. She's a congresswoman from Manhattan, East Side. I was with her first race. I helped her. She was always so nice. Oh, thank you. I made lots of contributions over the years. You know, in New York, if you're not, it's like purely Democrat, especially Manhattan. So what happens, I make lots of contributions, years and years and years. I go run. The first person I see, Carolyn Maloney. I raise my hand to impeach. Well, give me back the damn money that I've been paying her for so many years. Let her pay me back all the money. Let her pay me back all the money.
Wow.
I recognize Israel's true capital and open the American embassy in Jerusalem. And we also recognized Israeli sovereignty over the Golan Heights. Big deal.
This is him doing the best of now. And in fact, he's in Michigan again. This is the president last night touting Ford's investment in Michigan as well.
So, Ford Motor Company just announced that it is investing $1.5 billion in 2 auto factories in the Detroit area, creating another 3,000 Michigan jobs. But think of this. African American unemployment is the lowest it's ever been in the history of our country. Their poverty levels at a horrible poverty level in the negative sense. Now their poverty levels are the best they've ever been in the history of our country. Same with Hispanic Americans. The best unemployment numbers and employment numbers. And the same with Asians. The best unemployment. And women, I'm sorry, 71 years. Best in 71 years. I've let the women down. But I think within another couple of months you'll be historical. So only 71 years.
You'll be historical.
The best in 71 years. But what we're doing has been an incredible thing.
Women, you'll be historical soon enough. It's just 71 years right now, the best employment for women in 71 years. You'll be historical soon. He continues, though. I want to set the stage for this, though, this next clip, instead of just playing it. The president's campaign team truly believes, and I need to emphasize this because you're going to think I'm crazy saying it. I've talked to them. They really do believe it. They believe they have polling to show it, that they are actually going to make inroads with the African American community in 2020. They really genuinely do believe that they are going to be able to gain votes. Remember, the president in 2016 did better than Mitt Romney with black voters. He really does believe, his campaign really does believe, and they really do believe they have accurate polling to show that there is more support for the president in the black community than people realize, and in part it's the economy, and he keeps bringing this up on the campaign trail.
So, and you know what else, the thing I'm happiest about? African American unemployment, the lowest in the history of our country. African American. Remember I used to say, you remember, look at you. Are you the greatest guy? Everyone thinks, do I pay? I'm telling you, I have a group of African-American guys and gals, by the way, that follow me around, and they think I pay them, and I don't. I love them. They love me. They come. How many rallies have you come to? A lot. They're great people, just great. Thank you. Is that right? I don't know him, but I like him. I see him at so many rallies. I appreciate it. You and your group, they're great people. Thank you. So you're obviously doing well if you can travel around like that, right? He knows. I appreciate it. I really do. I think it's fantastic. Thank you. Thank you. But think of this. African American.
Unemployment is at an all-time low, he goes on to say.
We want to take back the House. We'll hold the Senate, and we'll keep the White House. You will have the greatest health care. You will continue with the greatest judges. You know, we have judges that are... We just had a great story in the Wall Street Journal. I have to be always very truthful, because if I'm a little bit off, they call me a liar. They'll say he gets a Pinocchio, the stupid Washington Post. They have Pinocchio. I mean, even if you like saying things perfectly, it's a Pinocchio. There's nothing you can say where you don't get a Pinocchio. But what happens is we have, Wall Street Journal the other day, got the best story. They said, whether you like him or not, the job he's done on judges and Supreme Court justices. But the job he's done on judges is amazing. Say it's the most important thing. See, I don't agree. I say defense is the most, the military is the most. But once you're beyond the military, I mean, to me, defense is the most important. Because without good defense, maybe we don't need judges so much, right? It's like...
Listen, nobody's going to care about impeachment next year. Unless you are a hyper-aggressive partisan, you're not going to care about impeachment next year. Did you remember that this year the president had historic meetings with North Korea? Did you remember any of that? Do you remember any of the other major stories that have happened this year? No, you probably did not. And you didn't because our news cycle moves so fast you can't keep up with stuff. Remember Greta Thunberg? Yeah, that was this year too. The yacht across the Atlantic, that was this year. The wildfires in California, that was this year, last year, the year before. You can't keep up with this stuff. The cycle moves on. People are going to care about jobs. They're going to care about the economy. They're going to care about their community. They're going to care about the president's latest tweets at the end of October 2020, into November 2020. They're going to care about the economy, and they're going to care about whether or not they're working, and their friends and family are working, and their kids are moving out of the basement because they got jobs of their own, and they're starting families. They're going to worry about all of that stuff. Nobody's going to care about impeachment. And the news media whips this stuff up, and the news media forgets that the news cycle that they're responsible for is outpacing everybody's ability to pay attention.
News and in-depth analysis from
It is Erick Erickson here. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425, but you can't call in. My call screener's gone. I got to finish up some of the president's sound bites from his rally so I can move on to other stuff. But I feel compelled to play two of these. One of them on Pete Buttigieg. We'll get there, but here's this one first.
With today's illegal, unconstitutional, and partisan impeachment,
it's not unconstitutional.
The do-nothing Democrats, and they are do-nothing. All they want to do is focus on this. What they could be doing are declaring their deep hatred and disdain for the American voter. This lawless partisan impeachment is a political suicide march for the Democrat Party. Have you seen my polls in the last 4 weeks?
Have you seen my? It's very interesting. I'm seeing several people noting on social media. The NBC News has released a poll that shows the nation very divided on impeachment. And it's very clear that they have what the president's job approval rating is. But they haven't released the job approval rating. Why are they not releasing the job approval rating if they have it? And they do have it, by the way. You can tell from the data that they asked what the president's job approval rating is. And NBC, and I know this isn't conspiracy theory land. This is just, there are multiple people I see on social media pointing out they clearly asked the question, why aren't they releasing the results? NBC, Wall Street Journal, why aren't you releasing the results? By the way, their polling shows that the nation is as divided as ever on the issue of impeachment. The Democrats failed to sell it. Well, believe it or not, there's going to be a Democratic debate. Did you realize the Democrats scheduled a debate? We're less than a week from Christmas, and they've scheduled another debate. Well, the president last night decided to weigh in on Pete Buttigieg.
And they said, here's what you do. Boot, edge, edge. Say edge like the edge of a building. Edge, edge. Boot, edge, edge. Alfred E. Newman. You got to be older to know what that means.
Mad Magazine. When I was little, Mad Magazine was a thing. I had an older cousin, much older than me, who liked Spy versus Spy in Alfred E. Newman. Beat Boot Edge Edge. Buttigieg. He'll be on stage tonight. It's going to be an all-white Democratic panel because, Cory Booker didn't qualify for it. I shouldn't say it's going to be all-white. Andrew Yang wound up qualifying for it at the last minute. So Yang will be there. Cory Booker will not be there. And the Democrats, here's what's going to be interesting. Will they address impeachment? And I ask that because the Democrats in the House are saying the Senate needs to have a fair impeachment trial. But Kamala Harris, Cory Booker, Bernie Sanders, and Elizabeth Warren have all of them, every single one of them, come out and said the president should be removed from office. How is it a fair trial when the Democrats themselves in the Senate are already saying that their minds are made up? They don't need to hear the evidence. They know.
30.
I wonder if they'll ask him about that. I wonder if they will. I'll give you a preview of the Democratic debate when we come back. But we need to move on from impeachment as well. There is, believe it or not, a lot of other news out there, including the fact that Inspector General Horowitz testified again before the Senate yesterday, and impeachment has completely overshadowed what he said, and Obamacare has been ruled unconstitutional. Welcome. It's Erick Erickson here, the Erick Erickson Show across the state of Georgia. The phone number, if you want to call in, well, I don't know why I keep giving it to you because you can't call in, but 877-97-ERIC. We'll be back to phone calls when we get to January 2nd and we're all back. Next year, by next year, give me 365 days and I will have, I'm sure, put it on my calendar and remembered I got to have a backup call screener. In any event, you can always get me on Twitter at EW Erickson, although I don't recommend Twitter. Twitter is, you know, the story from the Bible where Jesus cast the legion of demons out of the two possessed men and puts them in the herd of pigs and they run down the hill and drown. Well, what the Bible leaves out, because it would have confused people in the first century, is that after the demons got out of the pigs, they all fast forwarded and got Twitter accounts, and that explains how social media operates. It's a terrible place to be. If I didn't feel obligated professionally to be there, I would just be on Instagram. You can follow me on Instagram, you know, because I'm not political on Instagram. I don't do rarely do I do politics on Instagram at EW Erickson. I do a lot of cooking. And it's on Instagram. You can get my recipes by texting the word recipe to 33777 if you like. Now, we need to move into other non-impeachment news because there is non-impeachment news. In fact, believe it or not, after all of this, do you know what's going to happen tonight? There actually is going to be a Democratic debate on CNN.
Big day in the Democratic primary race tonight, the last debate of 2019 with the fewest candidates on stage at once. Just 7 have qualified for this debate, which means you'll get to hear more from each one than ever before. It will be hosted by PBS and Politico. It begins at 8 p.m., and you can see it right here on CNN. Ryan Nobles live at Loyola Marymount University in Los Angeles with a preview of what we're going to see. And what we're going to see, Ryan, is very different.
Yeah, that's right, John. Because there are fewer candidates on stage, we do expect that they're going to get more of an opportunity to talk about some of these big issues that the Democratic field has been focused on. And in many ways, these Democratic candidates are hoping to regain the spotlight. The 2020 campaign, for the most part, been put on the back burner because of impeachment. We do expect impeachment to come up tonight, but there isn't the expectation that there will be a heavy focus on that. Instead, these Democratic candidates would prefer to focus on those issues they think their voters are concerned about. One of the big things we're looking for, though, will Pete Buttigieg, the mayor of South Bend, Indiana, come into focus tonight? He has, for the most part, escaped any kind of criticism from some of his Democratic competitors, at least on a debate stage. But that could change now that he is thought to be one of the leaders in Iowa, which is, of course, the first caucus state. And then, of course, could there be a breakthrough moment from some of the lower tier candidates, maybe Minnesota Senator Amy Klobuchar, who's still pretty far behind the upper tier of candidates, but is showing some signs of life in Iowa? Does she have the opportunity to break through here tonight? And, of course, John, though, there is some concern about a lack of diversity on this stage tonight. Senator Kamala Harris had qualified for the debate, but she, of course, dropped out. That means there are no African-American or Latino candidates on this stage tonight. That has led to some criticism, not only from candidates like Cory Booker and others who did not qualify, Julian Castro, but also the candidates who did make it here tonight, saying the DNC should relook at the way they invite candidates to this debate here tonight. Should be an important debate, John. A lot on the line for these candidates here. As you mentioned, the last debate of 2019.
You know, a couple of things here in this preview. Notice how Ryan Noble, the reporter, says that they don't want to focus a lot on impeachment tonight. Well, I would be interested to hear these Democratic senators who are going to be on stage talk about impeachment just from the standpoint of are they going to pretend to be objective when they've been calling for the president's removal forever? You're going to have Elizabeth Warren, Amy Klobuchar, and Bernie Sanders on stage from the Senate. They'll be joined by Joe Biden, Tom Steyer, Pete Buttigieg, and Andrew Yang. Andrew Yang being the Asian candidate. Notice as well that the Asian candidate is never treated as making it a diverse stage. You got to be black or Hispanic to have diversity. Why do they always treat Asian people as white people? I mean, that's what happens. Even look at Harvard. Harvard wants to have diversity of enrollment, and they punish Asian people for being successful at Harvard, penalize them. The whole thing is silly. But the other thing here that's worth noting, beyond saying they want to talk about what voters care about, and impeachment is clearly something they think voters don't actually care about, is you're going to have a situation on that stage where Joe Biden has rebounded and Bernie Sanders has taken back second place status from Elizabeth Warren. The media loves to focus on Pete Buttigieg, but he and Warren are kind of battling it out for third place right now. In fact, Warren on the campaign trail has been going after Pete Buttigieg.
His plan is not offering full health care coverage to anyone. His plan is still about high deductibles, about fees, about co-pays, and about uncovered expenses. What I'm offering is full health care coverage, and middle-class families don't have to pay a single dime to make this happen.
The audio there, it's not great, but you get a sense of what she's saying. She's attacking Pete Buttigieg for his health care plan, that it's a terrible health care plan. Meanwhile, she's cratering because of her health care plan. She's being rejected by Democratic voters because of her Medicare for All plan. And she's also being rejected because she continues to peddle this mythology about her tax cuts and her tax increases and how everything can be paid for based on taxes on the super wealthy.
The financial transactions tax is basically just a tax on every time stock trades on Wall Street. That's the basic idea. It's a very small tax, and depending on how much trading goes on, if you're doing the second-by-second trading, it actually generates a fair amount of money. If that second-by-second trading goes away, it generates less money, but that's probably a good thing in our economy. So I've supported a financial transactions tax.
So she wants a tax on millionaires and billionaires, and now she wants a financial tax on trading. If you're a day trader, you get penalized under her plan. And even the Democrats are rejecting this stuff. And, you know, she's one of the ones who's come out very forthrightly saying she wants the president gone. She thinks he should be thrown out of office. Listen to this from Bernie Sanders.
Have you decided what you plan to do with impeachment? How do you plan to vote?
Well, look, I believe that Trump should be impeached. I think you have a president who is running one of the most corrupt administrations in the history of this country. I think the evidence is pretty clear. If I were in the House, I would vote for impeachment. I am going to be a juror, in a sense, as a member of the United States Senate. I'm going to go in there with an open mind. I'm going to hear what Trump's defenders have to say. But if you ask me today, yeah, I think he has committed treasonable. He has committed impeachable offenses.
Treasonable, impeachable offenses, and yet they want us to believe that Donald Trump's going to get a fair trial in the Senate. They want us to believe that Donald Trump is going to get a fair trial in the Senate, that he's got to get a fair trial, and that somehow the Democrats of the Senate are going to give him a fair trial. That's nonsense. Genuine nonsense from the media these days. I got to tell you, I worked at CNN for 3 years, and then I went to Fox for 5 years. It continues to aggravate me to see people I know and like, some of whom I'm trading text messages with one of them right now. It continues to aggravate me to see people in the media playing a lot of this with a straight face, as if the outcome isn't known, as if the Democrats really are being fair and plotting and methodological, and that they really did do a thorough impeachment trial. Y'all, I'm sorry. If you're completely ignorant in your sense of history, you can say that the Democrats did a good job, but if you know anything about history, they did not. They rushed it. They didn't hear from all the witnesses. They had the opportunity to hear from the witnesses. They had the opportunity to get a court to compel them to come and to expedite the hearing so that they wouldn't be dragging it out. They didn't do any of that. They didn't hear from Mick Mulvaney. They didn't hear from John Bolton. They didn't want to hear from them. John Bolton, in fact, said he was willing to testify. He just needed a court to give him okay because of the executive privilege issue. The Democrats didn't even try. They decided to rush it through, and now it's in the Senate, and the Democrats are saying, "Oop, maybe not. Maybe we're not going to. Maybe we're not going to send the articles of impeachment to them." That's silly. They're essentially doing the Merrick Garland method. They don't want to have a hearing on the articles of it's the Democrats now who are pulling a Merrick Garland saying, nope, we're not even going to have a hearing on this stuff. That's silly. Hard to take it seriously when the Democrats aren't taken seriously. They did all this bluster about we've got the Constitution. We need to do this because of the Constitution. Well, the Constitution it says the Senate gets to make its own rules, and the Senate is the sole arbiter of trials of impeachment. And the House is like, no, we're not going to send it over to them unless they do the rules as we want them. No, you don't get that choice. You don't get that right. It's called separation of powers within the first article of the Constitution. The House and the Senate have different powers and different structures. You don't get to impose the House's will on the Senate. The Senate didn't get to impose the Senate's will on the House. The Senate was telling the House, hey, you need to talk to these witnesses. We're not going to have them if y'all don't have them. And the House chose not to. And now they're thinking, oh, we're not even going to send this to the Senate. You went through all of that, October, November, and December. And now suddenly you're not. And meanwhile, you've got members of the press who I know and like some of them. And they say it was a somber day in the House. Nancy Pelosi did not want to do this. Baloney. That's such garbage. Jamie Dupree from Cox Media Group just tweeted, Nancy Pelosi starts her news conference by talking about the House voting to impeachment and says, I have a spring in my step. And then when reporters keep asking about impeachment, she snaps at them. Anyone want to talk about the Mexico free trade agreement? Seriously? Come on, Nancy. This is just silly. Here is what the Nancy Pelosi has to say about all of this.
When we see the process that is set forth in the Senate, then we'll know the number of managers that we may have to go forward and who we would choose. So that's what I said last night. That's what I'm saying now. The precedent for this, and I met with my 6 chairs after some of us were together for a press conference after the votes last night, and we discussed the precedent of it all, and that is in the most recent case taking up an impeachment, there was a proposal on the floor put together in a bipartisan way. 100 senators voted for the process on how they would go forward on the case of President Clinton. We would hope that they could come to some conclusion like that. But in any event, we're ready. When we see what they have, we'll know who and how many we will send over. That's all I'm going to say about that now.
Now, here's Mitch McConnell responding.
We should go down that path because it divides the country. End quote. By the Speaker's own standards, the standards she set, she has failed the country. The case is not compelling, not overwhelming, and as a result, not bipartisan. The failure was made clear to everyone earlier this week when Senator Schumer began searching for ways the Senate could step out of our proper role and try to fix the House Democrats' failures for them. And it was made even more clear last night when Speaker Pelosi suggested that House Democrats may be too afraid to even transmit their shoddy work product to the Senate. Mr. President, it looks like the prosecutors are getting cold feet in front of the entire country and second-guessing whether they even want to go to trial.
Oops. She's given Mitch McConnell a talking point. The Republicans are seizing on this today, that this was all a political stunt in the House. It was all a dog and pony show, and they're not actually going to move forward with it. Well, what wasn't a dog and pony show was what happened in the Senate yesterday, completely overshadowed by impeachment. The Inspector General, Michael Horowitz, returned for another hearing before another Senate committee to talk about the FBI report. And he added to what he had said previously, none of it is really good for the FBI or really even the Obama administration. I've got the audio when we come back.
I really do like his opinion on things.
Erick Erickson.
Oh man, welcome back. I just saw this headline on CNN. Good gracious. A Denver radio show has been canceled after one of the Denver, Colorado. A Denver radio show has been canceled after one of the hosts wished for a quote-unquote nice school shooting to break up the coverage of Donald Trump's impeachment. The host was opening a segment of his show Tuesday afternoon when he said they'd be discussing the never-ending impeachment of Donald Trump. His co-host laughed before he said, you wish for a nice school shooting to interrupt the monopoly. No, don't ever say that. No, don't even say that. The co-host said, don't call us. Chuck didn't say that. Man, the radio show said that, or the radio station called it inappropriate. You think the show was canceled immediately? Yeah, listen, I don't talk with a script. I don't. I don't have a script on radio. I talk off the top of my head, and occasionally you say dumb things. But who thinks that's a good idea? To say something like that you wish for a school shooting to stop talking about that? No, that's irresponsible and wrong. I want to say something, though, that a buddy of mine pointed out that we know from the 9/11 Commission record. Program directors around the state are holding their breath saying, how's he going to transition out of this one? Do you know from the 9/11 Commission report, we know that the planning for 9/11 began around the time we were all distracted by the Clinton impeachment process. I'm not making that up. You can look it up for yourself in the commission report. The plotting and planning had begun. And the friend of mine who pointed this out yesterday said, we as a nation have become children and are so distracted by our internal squabbling, and this goes across the board, bipartisan. Meanwhile, our enemies are single-mindedly focused on beating us on the economic playing field, on the battlefield, you name it. And we are distracted by this squabbling. The Democrats went through an entire impeachment process knowing the president's not going to be convicted in the Senate. They tied up our State Department. They tied up our national security advisors to the president. They did it all to score political points with an impeachment they're now saying they may not even pursue in the Senate. That's not really smart. It's not really good. And we should all actually pray that history doesn't repeat itself, quite frankly. We really should pray that history doesn't repeat itself because we know our enemies are out to get us, and they're plotting, and we've become a distracted people. The FBI itself has become distracted and partisan, and it's upset a lot of people with its handling of the Clinton investigation. The Inspector General Michael Horowitz, testified again before the Senate yesterday. I got some audio. Let me play part of this before we go to break.
So if I recall from your testimony here today, is that the errors that were occurring, the fundamental errors and basic errors related to the FISA process, you didn't find any evidence that there was political bias there, no documentary evidence. The errors occurred, and those are troublesome, but you didn't necessarily link those to any political bias. Is that accurate?
So I want to draw a distinction there. What we didn't find was, as they were considering in August and September whether to seek a FISA, we didn't see evidence there in those communications. But as to the failures that occurred, we didn't find any of the explanations particularly satisfactory, in fact, unsatisfactory across the board. In the absence of satisfactory answers, I can't tell you as I sit here whether it was gross incompetence, and I think with the volume of errors, you could make an argument that would be a hard sell, that it was just gross incompetence, to intentional, or somewhere in between, and what the motivations were. I can think of plenty of motivations that could have caused that to occur, but we didn't have any hard evidence that I can sit here and tell you Why did these occur? I can tell you they occurred. I can tell you we didn't get good explanations.
30.
But I can't tell you why.
Can't tell us why. Can't tell you why. That's fascinating. It actually is rather fascinating that there was
15.
lots of misconduct. What else does he say? Well, he's changed his tune a little bit on the partisanship involved. We'll get into that audio when we come back. My buddy, welcome back. It's Erick Erickson here. Across the state of Georgia, broadcasting actually live from Macon and through a series of tubes known as the internet to my station WGAU in Athens, Georgia, from whence it shall come to all the stations in Georgia. Around the state of Georgia. And my buddy Dan McLaughlin just tweeted this out. He's baseball crank on Twitter. That feeling when you literally impeached the president of the United States for obstructing your impeachment and then wake up the next day and obstruct your impeachment. It's true. I mean, in one of the articles of impeachment, they blast the president for obstructing their impeachment. And today, the Democrats are obstructing their impeachment, saying they're not going to move the impeachment to the to the Senate. Oh, well, we could spend all day on this, but we got the Inspector General from the Justice Department, Michael Horowitz, testified again before the Senate yesterday. They asked him, remember he first said there was no partisan motivation that he could determine in investigating the president. Now they asked him, the senators asked him specifically about these text messages, the Peter Strzok, Lisa Page text messages. Lisa Page, you should know, trying to prove that she's not a partisan, went on Rachel Maddow's left-wing partisan show to blast the president of the United States. Here's Michael Horowitz.
Before we start the clock on me, I did want to provide some clarity. I was going to do this in my opening statement, but I think it's best of just a quick little exchange here. In a number of places, not only this Inspector General's report, but also in the mid-year exam, you have a similar statement, and I'm going to quote, "We did not find documentary or testimonial evidence that political bias or improper motivation influenced the decisions, fill in the blank." And you've used it in a number of cases. Now, I know we talked earlier about you're pretty confident there was no political bias in the opening of the investigation with Bill Priestap.
Yeah, we did not find evidence, and as to him, we knew who made the decision. We could focus specifically on him.
But you definitely, in both these investigations, you found political bias.
We found, through the text messages, evidence of people's political bias, correct.
Through the text messages, who would they be talking about? That would be Lisa and Peter. Just so we're clear here, because the media used his prior statements to say that they weren't politically biased, and yet he actually is saying through their text messages you can see there actually was some partisan bias there. Here's a little more of the exchange with the Senate.
Given the abuses that were found during this investigation, what should the vetting process be for assets and criminal informants? What do you think
well, there clearly on the FBI side needs to be a better process or a more effective process and understanding in place on how to vet individuals and how to make sure that managers are supervising. And the reason we made the referrals for accountability of the supervisors is this is not only a failure of the line agents, this is a failure of management from the first level all the way up to ensure hard questions are being asked. When you're running something like this, you've got to ask insightful, targeted questions. You got to know the answers, and you've got to make sure that managers understand what their responsibilities are. So on the easier end is training. On the harder end is making people realize that they can't be making all these discretionary judgments for themselves. Other people need to know about them.
Yeah. You know, this goes back to James Comey and his statements to Chris Matthews about the FBI and claiming he was somehow vindicated. This was from Sunday on Fox News Sunday with Chris Wallace.
Think this is vindication? It is. I mean, the FBI's had to wait 2 years while the president and his followers lied about the institution. Finally, the truth gets told.
Does your report vindicate Mr. Comey?
It doesn't vindicate anyone at the FBI who touched this, including the leadership.
The IG says you should feel no vindication.
Well, maybe it turns upon how we understand the word. What I mean is that the FBI was accused of treason, of illegal spying, of tapping Mr. Trump's wires illegally, of opening an investigation without justification, of being a criminal conspiracy to defeat and then unseat a president. All of that was nonsense. I think it's really important that the Inspector General looked at that and that the American people, your viewers and all viewers, understand that's true. But he also found things that we were never accused of, which is real sloppiness. And that's concerning. As I've said all along, has to be focused on. If I were director, I'd be very concerned about it and diving into it.
Listen, Comey, the fact that Comey actually thinks he comes away looking good on this says a whole lot bad about James Comey. One last bit from Horowitz from his hearing yesterday.
In the Deputy Attorney General's office, whether you're the Deputy Attorney General or right below the Deputy Attorney General, to have someone on your staff doing what was going on and not telling anybody is highly problematic. And as we point out here, the net result of that is the Deputy Attorney General was signing a warrant that did not include key information that someone on her staff knew and had told the FBI, but the FBI had not come back and told the Justice Department. That was the net outcome of that. That's a problem.
I mean, Charlie, my producer, sometimes says, you just don't need to play audio and come away, yep. But yep. I mean, I wish I had more substance to add to that. You needed to hear the soundbite, but what more do you add to something like that? They withheld information. This really does make the FBI look bad. It genuinely makes the FBI look bad. To have withheld information, to have changed information, to have altered information to the FISA court. You know, the FISA court has now come out and blasted the FBI and said that they're owed candor on how the FBI is going to fix this and why they shouldn't be skeptical of other FISA requests from the FBI. They should be. I want to go back to audio from earlier this week to Josh Hawley, who talked about this.
Is it worse to have a foreign government trying to meddle in our elections? Or is it worse to have our own government meddling in the election? Because that's, I think, exactly what this report shows. It shows that our government, the most powerful law enforcement agency in the nation, the FBI, effectively meddled in an ongoing presidential campaign. And the thing that gets me is you expect it from foreign governments. I'm not saying it's good, but I'm saying that you expect it. They've been doing it for years. Russia's been doing it for years. We know they tried to do it this last cycle. China has been doing it. Others have been doing it. And we know what steps to take. We've got to take them more effectively. But when our own government does it, how can the American people have confidence? And what do we do? I mean, what do we do? And there's one actor here, I think, who has not gotten the credit that they collectively deserve, and that's the Democrat National Committee. I just think, I've heard my friends on the other side of the aisle complain about Hillary Clinton's campaign and how ineffective it was and how the DNC didn't do a good job in 2016. I beg to differ. This is the most incredible. The DNC pays for the Steele dossier, solicits the Steele dossier, and then gets the Federal Bureau of Investigation to go get FISA warrants, surveil an American citizen, surveil a presidential campaign, all on the basis of this manufactured garbage that they paid for. I mean, that's extraordinary. That has got to be a first time in history.
Hawley is right. First of all, hang on a second. How am I doing on time? Oh yeah, I'm doing good on time. I need to go to this Ross Douthat column at the New York Times because this summarizes. Oh my gosh, you would think I really was from Louisiana. Well, I am from Louisiana. This summarizes. It's almost Friday. It's almost Christmas vacation. I got to read you part of this Ross Douthat piece from the New York Times. I know it's the New York Times, but it's Ross. Come on. An essential motion picture for the Trump era is what I didn't particularly care for when it first came out. I speak of Burn After Reading, the Coen brothers' pitch black comedy about morons attempting spycraft in Washington, D.C., which upon first viewing seems too unremittingly misanthropic, too grimly contemptuous of its characters, without the flashes of grace that illuminate the darkness in most Coen depictions of human folly. That was 2008. How young and naive I was back then. Just over a decade later, the Coen's portrait of grasping fools and self-important beltway nitwits trying to behave like characters in a John le Carré novel seems less like misanthropy and more like prophecy, a vision of amoral political buffoonery that's arguably the most realistic depiction of Trumpiness to date. If you imagine L'Affaire Russe as a movie pitch, it would promise to tell three intertwining stories. In the first thread, Russian hackers used the simplest of phishing techniques against clueless Democratic muckety-mucks to tap into a bunch of Democratic Party emails, exposing not state secrets, but a bunch of squalid intra-party backbiting. In the second thread, the dolts and self-promoters surrounding a buffoonish presidential candidate try to make contact with the Russians, something the Russians don't particularly want and the dolts are too doltish to accomplish, leading to absurdist scenes like the famous Trump Tower meeting where Don Jr. shows up expecting a big intel deal and instead gets a lecture on Russian adoptions while Jared Kushner tunes out and checks his phone. This comedy of hapless would-be dirty tricksters then weaves into the third thread, the one the Inspector General report has unspooled for us. In this part of the movie, the law enforcement agents watching the Russian hacking unfold become convinced, with an assist from a top-secret dossier compiled by a handsome ex-spook who used to pal around with the buffoonish candidate's daughter, that they're investigating a vast, world-shaking conspiracy complete with Russian intelligence assets in the Trump campaign and secret Prague meetings to set the agenda for a Manchurian candidacy. And then their investigation, which focuses on a couple of random comic Trump world figures and comes up empty, gets taken up by a credulous media, which spins a narrative of noble G-men and legal eagles who are supposedly about to reveal Putin's Baroque, dating to the 1980s conspiracy to install a puppet in the White House, knock out our power grid, and probably poison our precious bodily fluids as well. To borrow from Oscar Wilde, it would take a heart of stone to contemplate this tale without some laughter, enough to easily justify casting comic actors in all the different parts. I'm thinking Will Arnett as the full Gob Bluth and Don Jr., George Clooney playing Christopher Steele in full handsome burglar mode, Vince Vaughn as James Comey, Kate McKinnon radiating paranoid intensity as Rachel Maddow, and Bill Murray as a nearly comatose Robert Mueller, and post-prison Roger Stone and Anthony Weiner as themselves. Of course, the stone-hearted will object that we shouldn't laugh so much, as the punchline is still that Donald Trump is president. Sure, at some point we might be able to look back and find mordant comedy in an arc like James Comey's, who sabotaged Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign by announcing a last-minute investigation of the infamous Weiner laptop. And then remade himself as a self-righteous icon of la resistance by legitimizing P-tape rumors. But the time for laughter is later. Once Trump is gone, the shadow of corruption lifted, and all the vulnerable and marginal people victimized can breathe. I have two answers to the case against laughter. The first is a rejection of its final premise. Trump has indeed hurt vulnerable people, but between the leaven of incompetence of his cruelty, his rejection of some of the disastrous ambitions of his predecessors, and a certain amount of fool's luck, his administration, listen to this, y'all, this is Rouse Douthat of the New York Times. The Trump administration is arguably responsible for far fewer human tragedies so far than more high-minded, less personally degraded presidencies. And I don't just mean reference to George W. Bush and the Iraq War here. To return to the subject of my last column, in President Barack Obama's first few years in office, about 1,500 American soldiers and thousands more Afghans died for a futile and dishonestly justified campaign. If laughter were permissible while that deadly folly was transpiring, mostly out of public eye, it's probably okay to laugh at our situation now. The second answer is a mild suggestion that a little more laughter might actually be good for the anti-Trump resistance. Amen to that. In particular, anti-Trumpists might be a touch more effective if they could recognize how humorless and constant self-important dudgeon frequently helps the Trumpian cause by setting up the dynamic I just sketched in my movie pitch, where the country is asked to choose between two kinds of folly, one squalid and corrupt, but the other pompous, insufferable, and paranoid in its own important way. The latter sort of folly is at its worst not on the far left, but on the establishment center left, and the never Trump center right, to which I belonged in 2016 and still do, in the sense that I continue to regard our president as unfit. But that belief, it seems to me, should coexist with some self-awareness about the many blunders by the great and good that brought us to this pass, some instinct for how absurd it sounds to write and talk as though the republic dies daily, only to be resurrected overnight and slain by Trump anew, and some recognition that when our law enforcement agencies send their G-men to save the republic from Vladimir Putin, sometimes they don't send their best. Or to bring things to a finer point, if you couldn't see long before the Mueller report fizzle or the latest revelations of FBI incompetence that James Comey was a fundamentally comic figure rather than a paragon of old-school American virtue, then you have no business leading a resistance movement against a president whose main political talent is to make his rivals look ridiculous. He's not wrong. That's Ross Douthat in the New York Times. He's not wrong. It really is amazing to me if the president has a single and he's got several superpowers. But the chief superpower of the president of the United States is to make his opponents look more ridiculous than himself. And he does it every day. And now Nancy Pelosi is doing it herself by going through all the constitutional bluster about saving the republic by impeaching the president, only to say, oh, our bad, we're not actually going to go through with it.
Honest news and conservative views.
Never separated from the truth.
It's the Erick Erickson Show.
I would just like to note that it's still cold out there. And so I decided several months ago, several years ago, I wound up in the hospital with a bunch of blood clots in my lungs. I was in ICU for 2 weeks and was not cleared for over a year to be able to exercise vigorously. And I still got a few clots in my lungs. But I finally decided, after my doctor was okay with it, to start back to CrossFit. And these CrossFit places, they don't actually run the air conditioner or the heater. So you got to go bundle up. And I'm just looking at the weather. It's still cold out there. It is 48 in Macon. Where I am. The high today is going to be 54 degrees. It's going to be into the 20s tonight here. It's still below 40 in Adairsville and Blue Ridge and Dalton. Rome's barely over 40 right now, and Athens is at 46. You got to get, you got to get to Valdosta and Vidalia to get into the 50s right now. It's just cold out there. 45 in Jasper right now. It's cold across the state of Georgia right now, and I don't like it, but I do, because it should be cold for Christmas, shouldn't it? I see on Christmas Eve in Macon it's going to be 70 degrees. There's just something wrong with a cold Christmas or a hot Christmas. And I'm sure some of you are saying it's global warming, except I remember years ago when I was a kid in Louisiana, we came home from Dubai one time for Christmas, and it was in the 70s for Christmas, and this was in the late 80s, I suppose. I don't know. You're supposed to have cold Christmases. Well, I'm sure we will have another cold blast through. But I got to go to a gym, and it's going to be cold here in a little bit. For those of you in Macon, it's the towel place, the CrossFit towel place. It's over by the new mall on Riverside Drive. And I like it more. I believe it or not, me, lazy fat guy that I am, I actually like CrossFit more than I like a traditional gym, because you're doing all sorts of random exercises. Yesterday, I jumped off and on a box for an hour and threw a medicine ball in the air for an hour. It sucked. But it was better than just your standard stuff. But I got to get myself back in shape, because I like to eat. I like to eat and I like to cook, and that's a problem. I'm sure you wanted to know all of that. All right. Let me get back into news you can use, I suppose, here at the end. The president, as I mentioned before going into break, if the president has a single superpower, it is the ability to make his opponents look more ridiculous than he is. And you should admit the president is oftentimes quite ridiculous. There's no harm in pointing that out, even if you're going to vote for it. People get so defensive about him. I was critical of George W. Bush when he was president, and still voted for him. And no one was very defensive of George W. Bush, who himself could sometimes say and do ridiculous things. But with Donald Trump, it's like if you say anything critical about him, that you're a heretic, you're a traitor, burn all the heretics. No, listen, I think everybody in politics is ridiculous these days, and the president is ridiculous. But his superpower is he makes other people more ridiculous than himself. The Democrats for 3 months blustering about saving the Constitution and the Republic. Nancy Pelosi herself, for God's sakes, last night in impeachment, said that the president is an ongoing threat to our national security, therefore he must be impeached. And now she said, oh, my bad, we may not actually go through with it now, having done it. Yesterday, it was the most solemn, important occasion in American history, and today they don't even want to talk about it. That should tell you everything you need to know about the Democrats and impeachment. It was all a political stunt, and it's not going to matter. The reality is the voters will settle this in November of next year. And if the Democrats did have their way, why then, by God, we'd have President Pence, and I'd be okay with that, too. I'll talk to you guys tomorrow.